Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Don't Look Up. And this film, we do center on these two astronomers. We have Dr. Mindy and we also have Cate DiBiase. They basically are going about their lives in the way that they normally do. It's a normal day at the office where, they basically spend the majority of their nights, they spend the majority of their workday pretty much just like examining the sky, seeing if there's anything weird out there. And one day, Jennifer Lawrence's character Cate comes across this comet. And at first, everyone's really like joyous about it because this is very rare, but they start to realize that this comet is a lot deadlier than they did suspect. It is going to make impact with the Earth and probably kill everyone in its surface, and so now these two have to basically it is a race against the clock to try to convince everyone why this is so severe and hopefully try to save humanity once and for all, but also get past everyone's ignorance within the world. So Don't Look Up, I was very excited for this film. Look, I know a lot of people are not big fans of Adam McKay and the direction that he's gone with this more like serious direction, but I gotta be honest, I dug it. I really do. I like what he's doing. I like that he's gone in a more dramatic territory. I enjoyed Vice a lot more than I think a lot of people did. I think it was a really well done biopic that did a really good job of exploring like American politics, but also like the corruption behind it and things like that. And Don't Look Up, I was really just hoping that this could be a really well done satire. Obviously, yes, this is a very timely film in that way, and no, it's not anything that like we're surprised about, but I just was hoping that this film overall would cover that satire very well. I thought this could be another big hit from Adam McKay. And this film really seems to be dividing a lot of people as it's come out. I feel like this is probably the most divisive film of the year with the way people are talking about it. But I gotta be honest, I am not one of those people. I actually really love this movie a lot. This is such a sharp and witty satire that I think is so timely and so just like on point in so many ways with its views on humanity and things like that, and just the ignorance going on within the world. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but it also ends up being, I think, maybe one of the funniest movies of the entire year. But we are just getting into it right now, starting off with the cast, which, my God, I mean, talk about one of the most stacked casts in a long time. And I know I've said that for a lot of movies this year, but truly, like, the group of actors that Adam McKay was able to get together for this movie is just extraordinary. There's so much talent on display, and I'm very happy to say, I think everyone really does kill it here. I don't think there's a single performance in this movie that isn't at least trying to do something really crazy. With that said, let's talk about Leonardo DiCaprio. You guys already know my thoughts on him. He's my favorite actor working today. I think that he is just such a charismatic guy, but he's also someone that really does transform into these performances, and the role that he plays in this movie, I think, is probably one of his most impressive yet, because what I really like about Dr. Mindy as a character is that this is not a guy that is so, like, upfront and loud and obnoxious and things like that. No, this is someone that actually is very reserved. He's trying to stay calm. You can tell he's trying to stay as calm as possible. He's the one that's trying to take a more diplomatic approach to the situation, but you can see as the film goes on, he really does start to crack under the pressure, and DiCaprio does a really good job at portraying the fear, portraying also just the frustration building up inside of him, and eventually he does release it, and that gives us probably one of the most effective scenes I've seen from DiCaprio yet. I mean, everything he does in this movie, he understands his character so well, but I also feel like this was a very personal character for DiCaprio, because as we know, as a person, he is very much concerned about the environment. This is something that matters a lot to him. He is very... And, with him being an environmentalist himself, I feel like this is probably one of his most personal roles yet, because you can see how deeply affected DiCaprio also is by what's going on. So it kind of creates this, like, personal connection to what he's doing, but I also think it makes his performance that much stronger overall, because the emotion feels that much more raw. It feels that much more authentic, and I think he does a really great job in this film, which I think ends up being probably one of his most impressive roles to date. Love what he ended up doing here. I think the monologue that he has in this movie, I would definitely be down to see an Oscar nomination. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but if it happened, I would definitely be behind it. I think this is a really strong performance from him, just continues to show the kind of actor that Leonardo DiCaprio is. So I think while everyone gave a really strong performance, he easily was the biggest standout in this movie. I really love what he ended up doing here. And then Jennifer Lawrence, I think, is pretty much the opposite of him in this movie. I think she does a good job at playing sort of like his counterpart, where she's the one that is a lot more visceral in terms of her emotion. She's the one that from the beginning is just really just freaking out over what's going on. You can see how much this is breaking her, but especially after a certain point, you can really see how this starts to get to her and how hopeless she really is. And I thought that she did a really good job in this movie. I liked her a lot. I think she provided some really great comedic moments, but also some really good emotion into the film. And I think these two balance off each other very nicely. Not only do they understand these characters very well, but they really understand the satire of this movie very well. A lot of the time, they are very much the straight men in this film, but I think they play that role really well here. I really loved what they both end up doing in this movie, especially when they have to get like really bewildered and just really just so appalled at what everyone is saying and the certain actions that people are taking. I think they both do such an amazing job with that, and I think these two performances alone are enough of a reason to watch this film. But the rest of the cast, I mean, everyone really does an amazing job here. I gotta say, someone who was a huge standout for me that I was not expecting to love as much as I did was Jonah Hill in this film. Jonah Hill, of course, does play the president's son in this movie, and my god, what an asshole this guy is, but Hill relishes every single second of it. This guy is one of the biggest pricks you will watch in any film this year. He is so just selfish with the way he goes about things. He seems to have very little care into things that don't directly affect him, and just the way that he goes about things. I mean, you can just see the incompetence within this character, and I really loved what Hill ended up doing here. He is so funny to watch in this movie. There is one speech he gives to like calm the nation, and it literally had me in stitches. I mean, it is easily one of the funniest performances I have seen all year. I think it's also the funniest that Jonah Hill has been in a while. He's been funny, but I don't think he's been this funny in a while. This was absolutely the perfect role for him, and I really love what he ended up doing here. And of course, we gotta talk about Meryl Streep as well, who does play the President of the United States in this movie, and does a really good job with it. Meryl Streep, I think, really leans into again, just the corporate nature behind this character, just how little she cares about her people and things like that, and I think she played that character very well, very conniving, always trying to negotiate with people, always very manipulative in that way, and I think in general just does a really good job at playing that character. I really love what she ended up doing here. Mark Rylance, I think, is going to be another really big standout for people. His character, I don't want to say too much, but he is this tech mogul of sorts that is basically convinced himself that like every aspect of the world is going to be fixed through technology, and he is a really fun character to watch because there are people like Rylance out there, and he really does get into that role very nicely, so I liked what he ended up doing here. And then another big standout for me, I gotta say, was Cate Blanchett. I enjoyed her a lot in this movie as well. I think her and Tyler Perry are very well cast as these TV hosts that really are just trying to keep things like light and fun. Any sort of like bad news they try to heighten in a way that's like really just like overly positive to the point where it feels fake, and I thought they both did an excellent job with that. Blanchett in particular is so like stone cold throughout this movie. She has like this really like creepy smile on her face that like never really goes away. It's almost like sewn to her skin, and I really loved what she ended up doing here. I think, you know, Blanchett's one of the best actresses working today, but this film really reminds us what she can do with a role like this, and I very much enjoyed her in this film a lot. I thought she was a really big standout. Rob Morgan is very good here. Really, everyone does a great job. Ariana Grande doesn't have a ton to do in this movie, but I think she was very well cast in this film. Melanie Lynskey ends up giving a really effective performance as well. I don't want to get into her character too much, but I really liked what she ended up doing. But the unexpected heart of this movie honestly comes from Timothée Chalamet, who, without spoiling too much, his character does not come into the film until a little over the halfway point. And you would think with so many characters that we're juggling that he just wouldn't really make much of an impression. But Chalamet really comes in and ends up being the heart and soul of this movie, and I really loved what he ended up doing here. I thought he was a really big standout. Not only was he really funny, but he was a character that you really do feel yourself connecting to, and I really liked what they end up doing with him. Honestly, everyone really gave a great performance here. I think the performances are all very strong in this movie. You could see how much everyone was really into this film, and I think what's especially impressive is a lot of these actors are playing against type. They're not playing the type of roles that we normally see them play, and I think the film is that much more effective as a result, and I really just love seeing these actors get to play around with such, a lot of them very obnoxious characters. I thought they did such an incredible job with that here, and easily one of the most stacked ensembles of the entire year. Alright, but now let's get to the directing and the writing, which, I'll be honest, this is the thing that's going to make or break this movie for you. I've seen a lot of people say that this movie just feels like cheap pandering. It is Adam McKay, like, waving his finger in your face and yelling at you for 2 hours, and yeah, I mean, I'll say that right off the bat. This movie is not subtle in any way. It is very obvious what Adam McKay is trying to say with this movie. He does not in any way try to make it so it's like up to your own interpretation. He makes it very clear what he's trying to get across, but I gotta say, I really do commend him for that. I commend him for just going to the extreme places he does in this movie. He really does go all out to tell this story in the most, in the most fulfilling way possible. And to be honest, with the way things play out in this film, I don't feel like is all that off from what would happen in this scenario, and that's something that McKay, I think, understands very well, is that we have gotten to a point where if something like this could happen, this is very well how it could play out, and I think he does a really great job with that, and I've seen a lot of people complain there's too much comedy in this movie, but I really love the way he uses comedy in this film, because he always uses it in a way to make fun of the ignorance of these characters, to make fun of just how self-absorbed a lot of these characters are, and that's going to make some people very uncomfortable because maybe they've done similar things or they know someone who's done something similar, and I like that he's doing that. I like that he is, you know, trying to make people uncomfortable. I like that he is trying to frustrate you, and I think he does a really great job with that, and I found the comedy hysterical in this movie. There were so many scenes that just had me in stitches throughout this film. Some characters we came across, they're just complete idiots in this movie. Ron Perlman's character is one of the biggest dumbasses of the entire year, and I really loved what they ended up, what he ends up doing with them. There are just so many great running gags when it comes to these characters, and again, the ways that they act during this crisis and things like that. I really enjoyed what he did, but when it's time for the movie to get dark, McKay goes there as well. He doesn't try to hide the darkness. He doesn't try to hide just the hopeless nature of this film. You still do very much feel it. It's just done in a different way than I think some people were expecting. So if you're expecting like an ultra dark film, it doesn't really get there until a lot later on. For a while, this is very much a satire of sorts, and I think it works as such. I think it makes the film a lot more palatable. I think it makes the film a lot more watchable. But it also, again, has this very, it just has this very, biting nature where it's like, he really isn't afraid who he offends here. This is a film that he made because he had a specific goal in mind, and I always will applaud directors for doing that. I like when directors are like, I don't care if you're offended. I don't care if this hurts you. You know, I really don't care about that at all. I have a specific story that I want to take on, and I think McKay did a really good job with that. So, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say that I think his directing was shitty, because I think he overall accomplished what he needed to, and I was a big fan of his directing for sure. But now let's get into the screenplay here, which, similar to the directing, is really going to be the thing I think that solidifies whether or not this movie works for you, and rightfully so, because the way this film is written, there definitely are things I think are going to piss off some people. For one, aside from our two main characters and Timothée Chalamet to an extent, most of these characters are one-dimensional, but I feel like that's the intention here. It's supposed to show just how self-absorbed a lot of these characters have become. You know, throughout a good portion of this movie, we are watching these two scientists try to alert the public about the severity of this comet that's going to appear, and how they need to do something to stop this from happening, stop just, not wipe out and find a way to get it from not just exterminating all of them. But this is a society that cares so much more about this random celebrity breakup that has happened between Ariana Grande's character and Kid Cudi. And as ridiculous as that sounds very accurate to what goes on today. I mean, how many times are you like scrolling through Twitter and you come across a hashtag and you see like a random celebrity proposal or something like that, and everyone is just talking about it constantly, and you're just kind of like, why? Like, you don't know them. You don't have any connection to them. Why does this matter so much to you? And this film very much is trying to poke fun at that. And I think it does a really good job of that, because it really is kind of like holding that mask up to society and being like, yeah, this is something that happens a lot. This is something we are all guilty of in different ways. And I think this film, you know, the way they tackle it, I think is really well done in that way, because almost every single character here, like I said, is just so focused on their own self-interest. How does this affect them and things like that? You know, you've seen in the trailer, but when Jennifer Lawrence is bringing up to like, when Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence are first alerting like Cate Blanchett and Tyler Perry about this comet, Tyler Perry is literally saying that the comet should come to his ex-girlfriend's house because of, you know, how angry, you know, she made him and things like that. And again, that's really funny, but it also feels very accurate to what would actually happen. Like, people just wouldn't care if this were to happen. And the way that this situation is dealt with, again, I think is just eeringly similar. And I think that is in itself really well done. But at the same time, I think there's a little bit more to this movie than that, because what I think this film is really about is just, again, just the ignorance within humanity and things like that. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of, you know, relevant topics this film is trying to cover, mainly climate change. I've seen some people say it has to do with the pandemic, but Adam McKay has said that that's purely coincidental. He was mainly structuring this movie around climate change and just how much people will tune out any sort of news regarding that. And I've seen it happen myself. Like, I've seen people be like, oh, that's not a big deal. That's not something to worry about. And that's very similar to what happens here. Now, obviously, what's happening in this film is a lot more extreme in that way. But again, the way these characters dealt with it, I think makes a lot of sense, and I thought was really well done. I mean, even the politicians in this movie are just so self-absorbed. They don't give a shit about what's going on. Meryl Streep, when she first hears about this, cares so much more about these like midterm elections that are happening, and doesn't really care about any of the, you know, any of the safety of, you know, the severity of the situation. She doesn't care how this is going to affect her, because at the end of the day, she's rich and she knows that this doesn't affect her as much. And you know, it's just, you're following a character that's so egotistical in that way that it can feel repetitive, because it's like, you know how this character is going to react, you know what this character is going to say, but there are moments in this movie where the film tries to give you this false hope that maybe this is going to work out. Maybe this is going to, you know, maybe this is going to lead them down a good path. Maybe they're going to be able to, like, get those, maybe they're going to be able to, like, solve this problem. But then you start to realize the deception behind it and what the true intent is. And while it's really funny to watch, I think the film really does a good job of, again, just showing, how similar this is to what would actually happen. And I think with just how jaded and cynical everyone's become, this film at points feels like this horrifying reality, and I really did appreciate that a lot. Again, he really pulls no punches when it comes to that. But that being said, a lot of this is done, you know, with humor, and there's a lot of funny jokes throughout this movie, one of them being Jennifer Lawrence's character. There is this recurring gag where whenever she shows up to the presidential office, she is just so annoyed by the fact that these snacks that are free to everyone else are not free to them, and she's kind of like perplexed by that. I thought that was a really funny gag, and I thought definitely kept the movie fun, so I definitely enjoyed stuff like that a lot. But I think Mark Rylance's character is going to be a big comedic standout for a lot of people as well, just because of how fucking dense he is. I mean, every single issue going on with this, he thinks is going to be solved from, you know, he thinks is going to somehow be solved through this phone app that he has designed. He knows every single possibility that's going to happen, and it's like, I don't know how anyone trusts this guy. He seems so deceptive from the start, and that's where a lot of the comedy comes in, and there are a lot of great running gags with that character character, and I think that they played into that very nicely when it came to him. So again, I think the comedy is really well done here. Again, just showing, just how ignorant a lot of society really is, but also just how jaded a lot of them have really become. The way that people react to this news as well is not necessarily the way that you would expect, but again, seems kind of similar to, I think, what would probably happen in this scenario. The film often will cut back to a bunch of social media posts and people sharing about what's going on. And again, the tweets that you see, the messages that you see, it just seems like if you were to get on Twitter right now and this scenario were to happen, this is probably what you would see, kind of just dominating the internet. And this was like, and some of these messages are just very like unhealthy in that way. And these were the ones like leading, the internet and dominating the conversation. You can see how unhelpful a lot of society would be here, but I think that's really well done. But I also love seeing just how affected both Dr. Mindy and Cate are by this, but they're also affected in completely different ways, which I really did love a lot. Like I said, Cate is a lot more reactionary, while Dr. Mindy is a lot more reserved, and because of that, they go through completely different scenarios with the way that people treat them in this film. And I really did like seeing that, because it shows that even to a certain extent, the way that they are going about things isn't necessarily the right way to handle it, and that's something I thought was really well done here. I thought that they touched upon that very well in this movie. I was not expecting some of the places that they ended up going with some of these characters, but it really did add this sort of gray layer to everyone. I mean, even Dr. Mindy isn't always of sound mind. Cate isn't always on the right side of things, and I really like how this film is trying to critique everyone, is really trying to blame everyone for this. This is not one person's fault. It's a lot of different factors that causes this to happen, and I really like that a lot. I think McKay does a really good job of really understanding that. And while, like I said, I think a lot of these characters, yes, are very one note and don't exactly have a lot of dimensions to them, I think everyone had enough to do in this movie. Even Ariana Grande's character, who isn't really in this movie a lot, serves a purpose here, because again, she's this celebrity that everyone wants to focus their attention on and divert away from actual problems. And she plays that role perfectly here. She really embodies this celebrity that doesn't always have the best values, that isn't always making the best choices, but everyone sees as like this god in that way. And I really liked what they end up doing with her. As many have touched upon, she does have this song in the movie, and when that song came up, I thought it was honestly one of the highlights of the film, because it's just a perfect satire of these sort of like of these sort of like tribute songs, or songs that are made as like a means to awareness, that are usually very preachy, usually have a different intent behind them, and I think that she did a really great job with that. So I think honestly everyone was very well, I think everyone was very well utilized here. I've heard some people say that there are some characters that just feel kind of underutilized, and I didn't really feel that way. I felt like everyone had just the right amount of stuff to do. It's just the film isn't really about them. It's about these two scientists and their frustration with what's going on, and I think they do a good job with that. And like I said, people like Jonah Hill's character in this movie are just completely moronic with the way that he ends up going about things. But again, how still convinced the public is by what he's saying, how they're able to get behind it just because his mother is the president, the kind of power that he holds. Again, it seems very similar to other politicians, within the media and things like that. I thought he did a really great job. I thought they did a really great job of understanding that character and just showing that he is very unfit for this. Same with Meryl Streep. She's very unfit for this, but yet the public still is able to get behind it because we're just so blinded by the fact that politicians are always on the right side of things. Politicians are always going to do the right thing. They're always the end-all be-all in every situation. Everything has to be political. politicized in that way. You know, this movie really does understand that very well, and it kind of shows that, like, that's not always the case. We shouldn't always have this faith in politicians. We shouldn't put this blind faith in. We should always have that reasonable doubt, and I think this movie goes about that in a very interesting way that I honestly didn't think as much about until I watched this movie, and I really did like that overall. And then Timothée Chalamet's character, as I said, you know, in a film that has so many characters and there's so much going on, you would think him entering the film just makes things feel more overstuffed. They just aren't able to do much with him because at the point he's in the film, the movie's like an hour and 30 minutes in, but somehow they're able to do enough with that character to where, as I said, I think he generally does become the heart and soul of this movie. You really feel gravitated towards him. He's sort of like this hope that the film gives you that a lot of these characters don't have. And I really liked that about his character a lot. He honestly ended up becoming one of the best characters, I think, in the entire movie. I really liked what they ended up doing with him. This romance that he ends up having with Jennifer Lawrence's character was kind of unexpected, but I thought overall ended up being very well executed in that way. So yeah, I think all of the characters at least serve some kind of a purpose here. Even if it is the most cynical and like one-note characters, like Jonah Hill's character, who, like I said, is pretty much just the dumbass of the film. Like, that's his character. He's dumb, he's ignorant, he should not be in this position of power, neither should Meryl Streep. They still do enough with those characters to where I overall was satisfied by, you know, what ended up happening with them. But you also really feel that frustration in this movie. You feel how much this is affecting both these characters and how much they care about, you know, just finding any sort of means to an end here. They don't really care how it happens. They just want it to happen, and just the little progress that's happening and the way that this is being so poorly handled, you can just see how this is really just frustrating them, but also how they are blaming themselves for it. And I think McKay as well feels that same frustration. He feels that same anger, and I think it's very well handled in this film. So I think all of that is really well done. I enjoyed a lot of the writing here. I think this film plays into it very nicely. And again, just how little we focus on current events and are so caught up on trivial things like a celebrity breakup. I think all of that is so well handled. So a really strong screenplay all around, I think. The dialogue as well is razor sharp here. I think all of the dialogue works very well in this movie. And again, while it's definitely satirical, a lot of it does feel real in that way, especially once you get towards the third act of the film and there starts to be this divide of sorts towards what's happening. Again, it feels eerily similar to other events in the world, and I thought was just really well handled. So a really strong screenplay all around here. And especially when we get more into the third act, the film gets a lot darker. It gets a lot more emotional, and I think it really does sell its message very well, and I think a lot of people are going to be very affected by it. So I think regardless of if you think this film does a good job with its satirical elements, I think the third act is really going to get to you in that way, because I think they do enough good work to where it really does work. It's this really melancholy way of ending the film, and I was honestly very happy with the way they decided to wrap things up here. I thought, again, it just made a lot of sense with the type of story that they were trying to tell. So again, I think all around this is just a really strong screenplay. And the only other real hope in this film is Rob Morgan's character. He really is like the only sort of government official that these characters come across that has any sort of sound mind. He's the only guy that, like, he knows the severity of this, he knows how much this is affecting everyone, and he wants to try to put a stop to as much as he can, but he also has to deal with a lot of the media circus, because people do still respect him, people do take him seriously, and so he's kind of trying to balance it all, and I think by doing that, he becomes one of the most interesting characters in the entire film, and I really did like seeing where they ended up going with his character overall. I thought he was definitely someone that I really did enjoy watching in this movie a lot, but also the ticking clock element in this movie is really well done. You know, we get the sense early on these characters only have 6 weeks to solve this potential crisis, and they're all just kind of rushing around and they're not sure how it's going to work, but I really love seeing just the determination in these characters and how desperate they are to put an end to this, and how they really feel like they have to be the ones to do it. I thought was just overall a very effective way of storytelling in that way. The cinematography in this film, I think, is very well done. The look and feel of everything, it definitely seems like this could be real life. That's definitely what they're trying to get at, and I think they do a really good job. There are some really great shots in this movie that I thought was really well done. So I do think the film is very well shot. But I have to say, one of the best elements of this entire film is Nicholas Britell's score, which, oh my god, every time this guy composes something, he just blows me away. Even though I know that Nicholas Britell is already this amazing composer who already this year has given me one of the best scores of the year in the Underground Railroad, he comes in with this very, brassy and very, intense and hyperactive score, and it's just perfect for this movie. Again, it really adds that sort of ticking clock element very well, and it ended up being one of my favorite scores of the entire year. I have not been able to stop listening to it since I watched the film. I think he just did such a great job at scoring this movie, again adding this sort of bouncy feel, but then eventually diving a lot more into the hopelessness of the situation. I think overall his score was just very strong here, and I really loved what he ended up doing within this film. I think that's one of the best elements of this film. I already touched upon the song by Ariana Grande and Kid Cudi, but it's fantastic. I would definitely be down to see it get nominated for best original song at the Oscars and things like that, because it deserves every bit of that, and I really did enjoy that. So I really enjoyed the score in this movie. Let's talk about the editing, because that's something else I've seen people kind of touch upon of things that they really don't like in this movie. And yeah, this film is very rapidly edited. Very often we will cut from the middle of a conversation to another scene, and that can get really annoying at points. But I think for this film, it makes a lot of sense just because of how much is going on. Again, it shows that hyperactive nature of everything, and I thought that the editing worked very well in this film. I thought overall it was pretty well paced. This movie is 2.5 hours long, but I didn't really feel the length once. This movie honestly really did fly by for me, and I think the editing was a big reason for that. So I don't really have any issues when it comes to the editing overall. And the ending of this movie, like I said, the actual ending of this film is very effective. I think that's something that the movie does do a really strong job with. There are a couple post-credit scenes here, and I thought they were both really well done. They were really great callbacks to scenes that happened early on in the film, and I thought they wrapped things up in a really darkly funny way. Like a lot of this film is very darkly funny. I thought that the post-credit scenes really played into that very well. So again, there's a lot that I really do love about this movie. Is there anything that really does bring it down? Well, as I said, I think basically every character gets a really satisfying arc, even if they're not the most developed. I think they have enough to do. The only rule to that exception for me would be that of Jennifer Lawrence's character, who, it's not to say I didn't like her character, because I did quite a bit. I really like what her character stands for. I like what they're trying to do with her character. It's just there is a situation that comes up with her character very early on in the film, and it's not like the film glosses over it, because the movie definitely does get into it. It's just, I don't feel they went quite as deep with it as they really need to, especially when compared to Leonardo DiCaprio's character. I feel like his character, we really do explore the depths of what he's getting himself into, the way he's being treated, how he's really handling the situation. And with Jennifer Lawrence, I feel like it was done, but it was done in a way that felt a little bit underwritten. It really isn't until Timothée Chalamet's character comes in that her character has a lot to do, and I wish they would have done just a little bit more with her. There are some really effective scenes, again, showing the way that she is treated after this particular incident, but I just wish they could have went a little bit deeper with it. But really, other than that, I really don't have too many complaints with this film at all. This is just such a darkly funny and very sharp satire that really doesn't pull any punches. You can see that Adam McKay has a lot of passion for this issue. He really wants to dive deep into what is really angering him, but also really showing what could potentially happen if this scenario were to play out, and I think he does a really great job with that. There's a lot of ignorant characters in this movie, but each one of them I think really do represent a side of humanity, and something that a lot of us are very much known to do, whether it's the corrupt politicians we're following, whether it's this very ignorant tech mogul that is so convinced that everything he's going to do, he's going to be the one to solve all the world's problems, or whether it's someone as insignificant as Ariana Ariana Grande, who is just this celebrity that everyone is just so overly obsessed with. You know, I think overall this film does a really good job in capturing all of these different people and just how self-absorbed a lot of them are and how it really does take away from actual problems within the world. I think that it has such an amazing cast behind it, all of which give really strong performances, but Leonardo DiCaprio especially very much should be getting awards contention for sure. I really hope he is nominated for Best Actor because he very much does deserve it. A really great score from Nicholas Patel, which really helps the breakneck pacing of this film. Yes, the film can get very uncomfortable points for some people, and yes, it might be a little too repetitive with some of its comedy, but for me, I found this film to be extremely sharp. I really was riveted by a lot of what was going on here. There were so many directions that this movie ended up going that was honestly appalled by, but really I think does that great job in getting its message across and holding that mask up to society and just showing how in a situation like this we really are all guilty because of how preventable it really could have been. I think all of that is really well handled here. So in that way, I was honestly really impressed by Don't Look Up. This honestly is probably one of my favorite movies of the entire year. It's one of the funniest films of the entire year, but it also has one of the most poignant and I think important messages of the entire year that I think is dived into very well. I know a lot of people say it's very heavy-handed. I know a lot of people say that it's very unsubtle, but I think with the type of story this film is trying to tell, there really isn't a way to make it subtle. You kind of have to be obvious about it, and I really do applaud McKay for really going to those places. I think overall this is a very effective film, so I am going to give Don't Look Up an A. Like I said, I know a lot of people are very much against like Adam McKay doing more serious work, but I am definitely not one of those people. I want to see him continue to thrive with movies like this, and I hope he continues to because I think he definitely does have it in him for sure. But other than that, guys, my review of Don't Look Up. You know, what you guys saw this movie, all left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.